You have until sunset, Mr. Mercer. After that, the association moves forward without your cooperation. Vanessa Whitmore said it like she was reminding me when the hardware store closed. No raised voice. No argument. Just a blue folder held against her hip and 3 black sport utility vehicles parked in front of a cabin I had moved into less than 3 hours earlier. I looked past her at the open tailgate of my pickup. Half my life was still sitting there in cardboard boxes. That was quick, I said. Vanessa lowered her sunglasses. Excuse me. I have not unpacked my coffee cups yet. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The man beside her almost smiled. Vanessa did not. This is not about your move. She handed me 6 pages. It is about the land. My Uncle Robert's cabin sat on 42 wooded acres in western Montana, above a private development called Silver Ridge. Robert had owned the place before the first subdivision road was paved below it. After his death, the property came to me through his estate, and the title transfer had finally been completed a few weeks earlier. I had expected my first afternoon there to involve moving boxes and figuring out why the kitchen faucet whistled. Instead, I had the president of an association I did not belong to standing on my porch. Which land? I asked. Vanessa pointed toward the lower edge of the property. The access corridor from your gate to the Silver Ridge boundary, along with the adjoining controlled area. Controlled by who? The association. She said it without hesitation. One of the men behind her walked toward my fence carrying orange survey markers. Hold on, I called. He stopped. Do not put anything on my property unless I give you permission. Vanessa turned toward him. Mark the association boundary from the road. The man looked from her to me. Ma'am, he just said no. That was the first sensible thing anybody had said since they arrived. Vanessa gave him a tight look, and he stayed where he was. Then she turned back to me. Mr. Mercer, Silver Ridge has maintained this area for almost 19 years. Your uncle understood the arrangement. What arrangement? She tapped the folder in my hand. It is all there. I started reading. There were parcel numbers, a legal description, references to an old recorded agreement, and enough official language to make the document look impressive from 6 feet away. Vanessa kept talking while I read. She said I could not close the lower gate, restrict association access, change signs, or interfere with maintenance. Then she pointed to the last page. Sign there, and we can be done. What am I signing? Acknowledgement of existing association authority. That is not what I asked. She let out a small breath. You are acknowledging that Silver Ridge controls the corridor. I flipped back 2 pages. A name near the bottom caught my eye. Mercer Ridge Holdings. I knew that name. Robert had used the company years ago for some of his land dealings, and I remembered seeing it in the estate records. I did not remember why. Where did you get this? I asked. Association files. The whole agreement. Everything relevant is attached. I looked at the page numbers. Something about them bothered me, but Vanessa was already holding out a pen. Daniel, this has been settled for years. It was the first time she used my first name. Like we were old neighbors working through a misunderstanding. If it is settled, I said, another day should not hurt anything. Her expression changed. You have until sunset. Why sunset? Because the board authorized enforcement if you refuse. What kind of enforcement? Access measures. Legal review. Whatever becomes necessary. I looked at the man with the orange markers. He had put them back in his truck. Good. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page Vanessa had given me. I need a copy of that, she said. You gave it to me. For signature. And I am reading it. Vanessa glanced at the other board member, then back at me. You are making this harder than it needs to be. Maybe. But you came to my house on moving day and told me you control part of my land. I am going to read the paperwork. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Wind moved through the pines above the roof. Somewhere inside the cabin, my old refrigerator kicked on with a rattle. Vanessa finally took the folder back. Fine. Keep the acknowledgement page. Sign it by 7. Before she could turn away, I pointed to the paragraph citing the old agreement. You are saying this document is the source of Silver Ridge's rights? Yes. And that is the association's official position? Yes, Daniel. I handed her the acknowledgement page and her pen. Then sign that statement for me. She frowned. Why? Because if you want my signature, I want yours. Vanessa stared at me, then signed. President, Silver Ridge Property Association. She dated it and handed it back. 20 minutes later, the 3 vehicles disappeared down the mountain. I carried my boxes inside, but I did not unpack them. I put Vanessa's signed notice on Robert's kitchen table, opened the old metal file case that had come through the estate, and started looking for Mercer Ridge Holdings. It took less than 10 minutes to find the name. The document underneath it carried the same county recording number Vanessa had cited. I set the 2 papers beside each other. Then I noticed something I had missed on the porch. Vanessa's packet was supposed to reproduce the old recorded agreement. Her copy ended on page 4. The county receipt in Robert's file said the original agreement had 6. By 7 that evening, I still had not signed anything. I had, however, learned that 2 missing pages could make a long afternoon feel a lot longer. I sat at Robert's kitchen table with Vanessa's notice on one side and the old county receipt on the other. 6 pages recorded. 4 pages provided. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe the last 2 pages were signatures and boilerplate. I was not going to guess. At 7:14, my phone buzzed. Silver Ridge had sent an email marked formal enforcement notice. Vanessa had copied the board, the association manager, and what looked like the community mailing list. I opened it and read the first sentence twice. Silver Ridge was beginning administrative action to recover association-controlled property from an unauthorized occupant. Unauthorized occupant, I said to the empty kitchen. I looked around at Robert's old cabinets and the stack of estate documents with my name on them. That is new. The email warned residents not to accept new gates, signs, access restrictions, or boundary changes from me. I saved it, printed a copy, and put it beside Vanessa's signed statement. Then headlights swept across the front windows. A white Silver Ridge utility vehicle stopped near the gate. 2 men got out. One was the same contractor who had refused to plant the orange markers earlier. I walked onto the porch. Evening. He raised one hand. Mr. Mercer. His partner opened the rear door and reached for a bundle of markers. What are you doing? I asked. The first man looked uncomfortable. We were told to verify the association boundary. By Vanessa? Yes. I told you this afternoon that I do not consent to anyone entering my property to place markers. He nodded. I remember. His partner stopped moving. So what do you want us to do? I appreciated him asking. Stay outside the fence until somebody can show me what gives Silver Ridge the right to come in. The 2 men exchanged a look. Fair enough, the older one said. He took several photographs from the road instead. No argument. No performance. 5 minutes later they were gone. I wrote down the time and their vehicle number, then went back inside. That was when I found the envelope. It was buried beneath old tax receipts in Robert's metal file case, labeled lower access in his handwriting. Inside was another copy of the county recording receipt and 4 pages of the same agreement Vanessa had cited. Still no pages 5 and 6. But the receipt included an index entry I had overlooked. Next to the original developer's name was a word I had not seen anywhere in Vanessa's paperwork. Lease. I knew enough English to know what that usually meant, but property documents have a talent for making familiar words expensive. I did not want to build a theory around one line on an old receipt. I checked the time. The county recording office had closed more than an hour earlier, so I opened my estate file instead. The title transfer had been completed only a few weeks before I moved in, and the packet was thick enough to stop a door. I worked through it page by page. Near the back, I found a parcel schedule attached to my deed. One number looked familiar. I pulled Vanessa's notice closer. Same parcel number. I checked again because I wanted it to be a mistake. It was not. The lower corridor she had described as association-controlled was listed inside the legal records transferred to me through Robert's estate. That did not mean Silver Ridge had no rights there. Robert could have leased it, granted access, recorded an easement, or signed something else years before. But it did mean Vanessa had skipped over a pretty important distinction when she stood on my porch telling me the land belonged under association control. At 8:32, another email arrived. Emergency board review. 9:30 the next morning. Attendance requested. Vanessa wrote that the board intended to confirm Silver Ridge's long-standing rights and address my refusal to cooperate. I almost replied. I even typed 3 sentences. Then I deleted them. There was nothing useful I could tell Vanessa until I had the complete document. I made coffee instead, which was a terrible idea that late at night, and kept reading. Around 10, I found an old handwritten note clipped to a survey map. Robert had written only 4 words beside the lower road. They maintain We retain. I stared at it for a while. Robert had been a man of very few words, especially when four would do. I still did not know what he meant. At 8:15 the next morning, I was standing at the county recorder's counter 18 miles away. The clerk, Linda Carver, took the recording number and typed it into her computer. 19 years old, she said. You need the whole instrument? Every page. You in some kind of property dispute? Apparently since yesterday. She gave me a sympathetic look. That is usually how people meet us. A few minutes later, she returned with 6 pages. I checked the first 4. They matched Vanessa's packet. Then I turned to page 5. The heading was ordinary enough, but the language underneath was not. It described permitted use, maintenance responsibilities, a defined 24-foot access corridor, and obligations assigned to the lessee. I read the word again. Lessee. Then I turned to page 6 and found Mercer Ridge Holdings listed on the opposite side of the agreement. My phone showed 9:23. Vanessa's board meeting started in 7 minutes. I did not drive towards Silver Ridge. I stepped into the hallway, photographed all 6 pages, and called Rachel Bennett, the real estate attorney who had helped finish Robert's estate transfer. Rachel, I think I found something in an old land agreement. How old? 19 years. That is never a good opening sentence. The HOA says it gives them control over part of my property. And what does it actually say? I looked down at page 5. That is what I need you to tell me. Rachel called me back before I reached my truck. Daniel, where are you right now? County Courthouse. Good. Do not leave yet. I leaned against the hallway wall with the 6-page agreement in my hand. That sounds encouraging. It means I want you to get certified copies while you are standing 10 feet from the recorder's office. How many? 2 complete copies. And ask whether there are amendments or assignments indexed under the same parties. I went back to Linda's counter. She searched the names, printed an index sheet, and circled 3 entries. One was the original agreement. Another had been recorded 8 years later. The third was an assignment filed 11 years after the original deal. Want those too? She asked. I have a feeling my attorney is going to say yes. Linda smiled. Your attorney sounds sensible. While she prepared the copies, I checked my phone. Vanessa had emailed at 9:38. Mr. Mercer failed to appear before the board and has provided no evidence supporting his refusal to recognize established association rights. A second message followed 6 minutes later, this one sent to the community list. It described me as a new property holder attempting to disrupt access that residents had relied on for nearly 2 decades. I forwarded both messages to Rachel. She called immediately. Do not answer those. I was not planning to. Good. I am reading page 5. Now, I stepped away from the counter. And the developer is clearly identified as lessee. Mercer Ridge Holdings is identified as lessor. This is a long-term ground and access lease, Daniel. It is not a deed transferring that corridor to the developer. I looked through the courthouse windows at the parking lot below. So Vanessa is wrong. Slow down. She may be wrong about ownership. That does not mean the association has no rights. A lease can give a tenant substantial rights, and I have not seen the later documents yet. You really know how to ruin a good moment. Rachel laughed. That is why you pay lawyers. I have not gotten your bill yet. Then enjoy the moment while you can. Linda waved me back to the counter. I collected the certified documents, thanked her, and carried everything to a bench near the front entrance. The assignment was only 3 pages. I could understand parts of it, but I stopped trying when the language started referring to successors, interests, and obligations under earlier instruments. Rachel had spent years reading that kind of thing. I had spent years managing construction schedules. Knowing when to hand a problem to somebody else was one of the few useful habits I had brought with me from work. I scanned the pages and sent them to her. Got them, she said. Give me time. How much? A few hours. Maybe longer. I want the title chain too. I thought we already had my deed. Your deed tells me what transferred to you. I need to know what happened to the lessor's interest between the day Robert signed this lease and the day the estate transferred the property to you. That was the first time I understood where she was looking. You were trying to find out who stands in Robert's place. Exactly. On the drive home, Vanessa called. I let it ring once before answering through the truck speakers. Daniel, we expected you this morning. I was at the county recorder. Silence for half a beat. Why? Getting the document your board cited. Her voice stayed pleasant, but the warmth disappeared. We already gave you the relevant agreement. You gave me 4 pages. Those are the operative sections. The recorded copy has. 6. Another pause. What are you suggesting? Nothing. I am reading. The association has used that corridor for 19 years. I know. We maintain it. I know that too. Then I do not understand what you think you are accomplishing. I turned onto the mountain road. Neither do I yet. That is why I am checking. She sighed. Daniel, I am trying to save you unnecessary legal expense. I appreciate the concern. Then sign the acknowledgement. No. The word sat there between us. Vanessa changed tone. The board is moving ahead. That is your decision. We will be sending maintenance personnel back to the corridor. They do not have my permission to enter outside whatever rights the recorded agreement actually grants. You cannot revoke established access because you moved in this week. I did not say I could. She went quiet again. I could almost hear her trying to decide whether I knew something she did not. Finally, she said, You are making a very poor first impression with your neighbors. I have only met 4 of them, Vanessa. 3 work for you. She ended the call shortly after that. When I reached the cabin, the mountain was bright under the late morning sun. No utility trucks. No orange markers. Just my moving boxes still stacked beside the porch because apparently unpacking had become the least urgent item on my schedule. I went inside and laid the certified lease beside Robert's handwritten note. They maintain, we retain. The sentence made more sense now, but not enough. At 1:30, Rachel sent a message asking for the estate transfer packet again. At 2:10, she asked whether Mercer Ridge Holdings had ever been dissolved. At 3:15, she called. I found Robert's transfer from the company. And I found where the land went. I am still tracing what happened to the lease interest. Rachel, you have been saying that all day. Because I would rather annoy you for 6 hours than give you the wrong answer in 6 minutes. Fair enough. Before hanging up, she added, one more thing. Do not tell Vanessa the developer was the lessee yet. Why not? Because she keeps putting the association's position in writing without understanding the document she is relying on. Let her finish telling us what she believes. 20 minutes later, another Silver Ridge email arrived. Vanessa had attached the board's formal findings from that morning. The last paragraph stated that the association possessed permanent control over the lower corridor through the original recorded agreement and expected my immediate compliance. Her signature was at the bottom. I printed it, placed it beside the certified lease, and looked at Robert's forward note again. Vanessa had spent 2 days telling everyone what Silver Ridge controlled. Rachel was trying to answer a much simpler question. Who had been allowing them to control it? Vanessa came back the next morning, but this time she did not bring a crowd. Just Martin Cole, the association manager, and Gregory Shaw, the attorney whose name had appeared at the bottom of the board findings. I was on the porch trying to make an old screen door close without kicking it when their vehicle stopped outside the gate. Gregory waited there until I walked down. I noticed that immediately. Mr. Mercer, he asked. Daniel is fine. He offered his hand. Gregory Shaw, I represent Silver Ridge. I figured. Vanessa stepped around him. We need to resolve the gate issue today. Gregory glanced at her. Let us talk first. That glance told me the 2 of them had not rehearsed this conversation as well as Vanessa thought. Gregory opened a leather portfolio. I understand you obtained the recorded agreement from the county. All 6 pages. May I ask what concern you have with the association's access? I do not have a problem with legitimate access. Vanessa jumped in. Then remove the gate. I looked at her. The gate was here when Robert signed the agreement. It interferes with association control. Does it interfere with anybody getting through? She hesitated. That is not the point. Gregory looked toward the gate. It was an old wooden ranch gate, wide enough for trucks, and it had not been locked since I arrived. Has the association been denied access? He asked. Not by me. Then for now, I suggest we separate access from ownership. Vanessa folded her arms. Nobody said ownership. I reached into the folder I had brought from the cabin and handed Gregory a copy of her first notice. He read the sentence about recovering association-controlled land from an unauthorized occupant. Then he read her signed statement. Vanessa, did you draft this? The board approved it. That was not my question. She looked at me instead. Daniel is playing word games. Gregory kept reading. Words are generally what these documents are made of. I liked him a little more after that. Vanessa pointed up the lane. The association has maintained that corridor for 19 years. We plow it. We grade it. We pay for drainage work. We have established rights. I am not disputing that you may have rights, I said. I am asking what those rights are. You know exactly what they are. No, I know what you keep calling them. Gregory closed the folder. Daniel, what are you asking the association to provide? A written statement identifying the land Silver Ridge claims to own, the land it claims a right to use, and the recorded document supporting each claim. Gregory nodded once. Reasonable. Vanessa turned toward him. Gregory, it is a reasonable request. She lowered her voice. We already held a board review. Without the complete recorded instrument, apparently. That landed harder than anything I could have said. Vanessa looked at me. You think 2 missing pages changed 19 years of history? I do not know. That is why I hired someone who reads this stuff for a living. Rachel Bennett? She asked. That surprised me. You know Rachel? It is a small county. Gregory looked interested now. Rachel represents you? She handled the final estate transfer and she is reviewing this. Vanessa's expression shifted. Not fear. More like irritation that the problem had become harder to dismiss. She opened her own folder and pulled out another notice. Then send this to her. The new document required me to remove the gate, allow unrestricted maintenance access, and acknowledge Silver Ridge authority over the corridor and what it called adjoining operational land. I read that phrase again. What is adjoining operational land? Martin finally spoke. Areas used for drainage, signage, and community access. How many acres? He looked at Vanessa. Vanessa answered, the map defines it. Which map? The association map. Recorded with the county? She did not answer. Gregory held out his hand. Let me see that notice. Vanessa gave it to him reluctantly. He read the first page and stopped. Who added unrestricted? Maintenance needs flexibility. The recorded corridor has dimensions. We have always maintained beyond the road edge. Gregory looked at her for a long second. That does not answer the question. Vanessa was losing patience. This is becoming ridiculous. Daniel arrived 4 days ago. Silver Ridge has operated here for 19 years. We are not going to redesign community access because a new owner suddenly wants to examine every comma. I am not asking you to redesign anything, I said. I am asking you not to redesign my property while we figure out what your agreement allows. Martin looked down. Gregory almost smiled, but caught himself. Vanessa took the notice back and signed it at the bottom. There. Now it is formal. She handed it to me. I looked at Gregory. You want a copy? Yes, please. Vanessa's head turned toward him. You are our attorney. Which is exactly why I want a copy. I photographed the document and gave him one. Before leaving, Vanessa pointed toward the lower lane. Maintenance will be surveying tomorrow. We may widen the usable area near the entrance. Gregory stopped walking. Widen it. A few feet. The turn is too narrow for larger service vehicles. Do not do that yet. Why? Because I have not reviewed the complete agreement. Vanessa stared at him, then at me. Fine. Survey only. After they drove away, I called Rachel. You are popular. What happened? I told her about the gate, the new notice, and Vanessa's plan to widen the corridor. Rachel stopped me there. She used the word widen? Twice. Send me the notice. I did. She called back 10 minutes later. Page 5 of the lease defines that corridor at 24 feet through the gate section. I need to check the amendments, but do not approve any widening. I was not planning. 2. Good. And Daniel, I found something in Robert's estate records. I sat down on the porch step. The lease. The transfer of the lessor interest. Robert moved it out of Mercer Ridge Holdings years ago and tied it to the underlying parcel. Meaning what? Meaning I am getting very close to telling you who inherited his side of that agreement. I looked down the mountain toward Silver Ridge. How close? Close enough that I want you to stop talking about the lease with Vanessa completely. That sounds promising. It sounds like I still have 2 records to verify. I laughed. There is the Rachel I know. She laughed too. Give me until tomorrow. That afternoon, Vanessa sent another community email. She wrote that Silver Ridge was preparing to restore full control over the corridor and accused me of delaying necessary maintenance. I saved it with the others. Then, just before dinner, Rachel forwarded me an old county planning map from the subdivision's original approval. The lease strip did not end at my gate. It ran down the mountain, split near the Silver Ridge boundary, and connected to more of the community than Vanessa had ever mentioned. I zoomed in on the map and called Rachel back. How much of their neighborhood depends on this thing? That, she said, is what I am working on now. The map Rachel sent me made one thing clear. Robert had not leased Silver Ridge a random strip of dirt. He had leased them something the original developer needed. I spent that evening at the kitchen table tracing the old corridor with my finger. From the county road, it crossed the lower edge of Robert's land, past my gate, then split near the subdivision boundary. One branch connected to the neighborhood entrance. Another followed a drainage and utility route. A third reached a small common area on the lower ridge. I called Rachel. So if Robert had said no 19 years ago, what would the developer have done? Found another design, negotiated with another landowner, or paid a lot more to build around him? Robert would have enjoyed that. From what you have told me about him, I suspect he did. I smiled. Robert was never difficult just for the pleasure of being difficult. He simply hated being rushed. When I was 13, my father and I spent a week helping him rebuild the west fence after a winter storm. A neighbor offered to buy a narrow strip along the boundary so he could straighten his driveway. Robert listened, poured the man coffee, studied the survey, and said no 3 days later. I asked why he needed 3 days if he already knew the answer. He told me, because a man asking for your land deserves a real answer, and you deserve enough time to know what you are giving away. I had not thought about that conversation in years. Sitting in his cabin with Vanessa's notices spread across his table, I finally understood why it had stayed with me. Robert bought the first part of this property before Silver Ridge had a name. Back then the road below was gravel and most of the mountain was timber. My father brought me here every summer. I learned to drive Robert's old pickup in the meadow before I was tall enough to look comfortable behind the wheel. I learned that wet pine burns badly, that mountain weather ignores forecasts, and that Robert could repair almost anything except the crooked cabinet door above the kitchen sink. He left it crooked for 30 years. It was still crooked. After my father died, I visited less than I should have. Work in Spokane kept giving me reasons to postpone things. Robert got older. Silver Ridge grew below him. Then one winter he called and told me he had finally replaced the porch steps. You waited 20 years, I said. They still worked, he replied. That was Robert. When he died, the cabin and 42 acres passed through his estate to me. The transfer took months because his records went back decades and Mercer Ridge holdings appeared in enough old documents to keep the title company busy. I did not buy the cabin. I inherited the responsibility for it, along with more paperwork than I knew existed. By the time the transfer was complete, I had already decided to leave Spokane. I was 58, tired of construction schedules, traffic, and answering work calls during dinner. I wanted to repair the roof before winter, split enough firewood to fill the shed, and find out. Weather mornings here were as quiet as I remembered. For days after moving in, I had an HOA president telling 80 homeowners that I was interfering with land her association controlled. The irony would have made Robert laugh. The next morning, a white Silver Ridge maintenance truck stopped outside my gate. 2 workers got out with measuring equipment. I walked down before they crossed the fence. Morning, guys. The older one recognized me. Morning, Mr. Mercer. We are just measuring today. Outside the property line. Unless you allow us in. I do not. He nodded. Understood. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes later and was less pleased. They cannot survey the corridor from out there. Then we should wait until Gregory finishes reviewing the agreement. Gregory works for the association. I know. And I am telling you this survey is authorized by the lease. She stared at me. We have been through this. Then one more day should not hurt. Vanessa walked over to the crew. I could not hear everything she said, but the older worker shook his head and pointed toward my fence. She came back looking irritated. You are obstructing routine maintenance. I am standing on my driveway drinking coffee. You know what I mean. Actually, I would like you to put it in writing. She gave me a look that suggested she was beginning to regret ever handing me a pen. The crew left without entering. Vanessa followed a few minutes later. At 11:16, Rachel called. I found the planning file. Good news. Interesting news. The original subdivision approval relied on that lease corridor, not just for ordinary vehicle access. The exhibits also reference drainage and utility functions connected to the development plan. I looked down toward the rooftops below. So they actually need it. They needed the rights Robert granted. That is different from owning it. You sound like Gregory now. Gregory sounds like a lawyer. Occasionally that is useful. I laughed. Then Rachel became serious. Daniel, I also found the recorded transfer where Robert moved the lessor interest out of Mercer Ridge Holdings. It follows the underlying parcel, the 42 acres. Yes. And the estate transferred that parcel to me. Yes. But I am checking one final assignment before I tell you the legal chain is complete. I leaned against the porch rail. You have been one document away for 2 days. Property records are patient. You should try it. Before we hung up, she said something that stayed with me. Robert did not stop the subdivision from using his land. He gave them a defined way to use it without giving the land away. I looked across the meadow toward the old pines. That sounded exactly like him. Permission without surrender. Cooperation without pretending boundaries did not exist. Late that afternoon, an email from Vanessa announced a special community meeting for Friday evening. She intended to present historical records proving Silver Ridge's authority over the corridor and what she now called associated community land. Residents were encouraged to attend. I forwarded it to Rachel with one question. Should I go? Her answer came back less than a minute later. Yes. Then another message appeared. And bring Robert's file. Friday morning, Rachel called before 8. I was on the porch replacing a rusted hinge when my phone rang. I finished the chain, she said. I put the screwdriver down. You sound unusually cheerful. I am a real estate attorney. This is cheerful. All right. Tell me. I heard papers moving on her desk. The original lease was between Mercer Ridge Holdings as lessor and the developer as lessee. 8 years later, Robert transferred the lessor interest with the underlying parcel. 11 years after the original agreement, Silver Ridge assumed the developer's position under a recorded assignment. Robert's side eventually passed through his estate with the 42 acres. I waited. Rachel. Yes. You are making me ask. She laughed. Daniel, you are the successor lessor. I sat down on the porch step. For several seconds, I just watched the trees move above the lane. So Vanessa has spent a week ordering me around under a lease I inherited. That is the short version. I like the short version. Do not get too comfortable with it. Silver Ridge has valid rights. You cannot simply close the road. Because you are annoyed with Vanessa. I do not want to close the road. Good. Robert granted a long-term ground and access lease. The association can use the defined corridor for the purposes stated in the agreement. Your ownership does not erase that. But they do not own the ground. Correct. And Vanessa cannot widen the corridor because she feels like it. Also correct. Page 5 fixes the gate section at 24 feet. The alterations clause requires lessor approval for widening, relocation, or permanent changes beyond ordinary maintenance. I picked up Vanessa's latest notice from the porch table. She put widening in writing. I know. I have it. What about the signs and the gate modifications? Potentially the same problem, depending on what they actually intended to install. That is why I told you not to approve anything. I looked down toward Silver Ridge. Does Gregory know who the lessor is? I do not know. Should we tell him before tonight? Rachel was quiet for a moment. No reason to ambush him. But there is also no reason to do the board's title work for them before Vanessa presents the position she has been circulating all week. That sounds a little like an ambush. No. An ambush would be hiding a document they could not obtain. Every document we have is recorded at the county. We are simply letting them explain their claim first. That distinction mattered to Rachel, and I understood why. The point was not to trick Silver Ridge. It was to find out whether anyone there had actually read the agreement before threatening me with it. There is one more thing, she said. Payment records. You found them. Some. Silver Ridge has been making periodic lease payments through a management account for years. I sat up. Wait. They have been paying under the agreement. Yes. The payments appear in older accounting records as land lease or access lease expenses. The most recent payment was held during Robert's estate transition because the management company did not have updated lessor information. So somebody at Silver Ridge knew this was a lease. Somebody did at some point. That does not mean Vanessa did. How do you forget you are paying rent? Organizations forget things all the time. People leave. Boards change. Accounting gets outsourced. A line item becomes a number nobody asks about. I thought about Robert's note. They maintain, we retain. He had understood the arrangement in 4 words. Silver Ridge had somehow needed 19 years and a room full of lawyers to lose track of it. Around noon, Gregory called me directly. Daniel, I wanted to speak before tonight. Go ahead. Vanessa tells me you are challenging the association's right to use the corridor. I am not. He paused. You are not. I have told her that several times. I am challenging her claim that Silver Ridge owns or has unrestricted control over my land. Another pause, longer this time. Those are different positions. Yes. Do you intend to restrict existing access? No. I intend to follow the recorded agreement. His voice changed slightly. You have had counsel review it. Rachel finished this morning. I see. I could hear him writing something. Would you be willing to provide her findings before the meeting? Rachel will bring the recorded documents. All right. He sounded less certain than he had at my gate. Daniel, for what it is worth, I have advised the board not to make physical changes until this is resolved. I appreciate that. Vanessa can be persistent. I noticed. He gave a quiet laugh. 6:30 tonight. We will be there. By 5, cars were already moving toward the clubhouse below. Rachel arrived at my cabin carrying one slim folder. I looked behind her toward the driveway. That is it. What were you expecting? A moving truck? After this week, maybe. She opened the folder on Robert's kitchen table. Certified deed. Complete 6-page lease. Recorded assignment showing Silver Ridge had assumed the lessee position. Recorded transfer connecting Robert's lessor interest to the parcel. Estate documents showing the parcel had transferred to me. 5 documents. That was all. What about every email Vanessa sent? I asked. Bring them, but we may not need them. And the payment records? Those stay here unless they become relevant. She closed the folder. Tonight, do not give a speech. Answer what you are asked. If Vanessa says something inaccurate, let Gregory see the documents and reach his own conclusion. You are taking all the fun out of this. Rachel looked at me over her glasses. You moved here for peace and quiet, remember? At 6:20, we drove down the mountain. The Silver Ridge clubhouse parking lot was nearly full. Through the front windows, I could see rows of folding chairs and a large map projected onto the wall. Vanessa stood beside it talking to residents as they came in. She wore the same calm smile she had worn on my porch the first day. When Rachel and I entered, Vanessa noticed the folder under Rachel's arm. Her eyes stayed on it for just a second. Then she looked at me. Glad you decided to come, Daniel. You invited me. I hope tonight clears up the confusion. Rachel and I took 2 seats near the back. At the front table, Gregory was flipping through a 4-page copy of the agreement. I recognized it immediately. Pages 5 and 6 were still missing. Rachel noticed too. She leaned toward me and spoke quietly. Now we know. Know what? She nodded toward Gregory's packet. Their attorney has been working from the same incomplete copy Vanessa gave you. Vanessa opened the meeting at 6:34, 4 minutes late, because she had spent those 4 minutes greeting people at the front of the room. Nearly every chair was occupied. I recognized the 2 maintenance workers from my gate sitting along the side wall. Martin Cole sat with the board. Gregory was at the far end of the table with the incomplete agreement in front of him. Rachel rested our folder on her lap. Do nothing yet, she whispered. I am sitting in a folding chair. I think I can manage that. She smiled. Vanessa tapped the microphone. Thank you for coming. I know there has been considerable discussion this week about the Mercer property and Silver Ridge's long-standing access rights. That was already different from her emails. In those, I had been an unauthorized occupant interfering with association-controlled land. Tonight, with Gregory sitting beside her, she had chosen access rights. She put the first map on the screen. My cabin appeared at the top, Silver Ridge below, and the corridor between us highlighted in yellow. For almost 19 years, the association and its predecessor have maintained this route. We grade it, plow it, manage drainage, and use it for community access. A man in the second row raised his hand. Is Daniel trying to close the road? Vanessa looked toward me before answering. He has refused to acknowledge our authority over it. The man turned around. That is not what I asked. A few people murmured. Vanessa kept her smile. The concern is that without formal recognition, future access could be disrupted. Gregory leaned toward his microphone. For clarity, I have not been informed that Mr. Mercer has actually denied existing access. Vanessa glanced at him. Not yet. I could feel Rachel beside me trying not to react. Another resident spoke. Then what exactly are we voting on? Enforcement authority, Vanessa said. So the board can protect established community property rights. Gregory looked down at his papers. Established access rights, he corrected. Vanessa stopped for half a second. Yes, Access and control rights. She changed the slide. A photograph of my wooden gate appeared. Then another photograph showed me standing near the fence with a coffee mug while the maintenance crew remained on the road. The caption said maintenance obstruction. One of the workers along the wall raised his hand. I should probably clarify that. Vanessa looked annoyed. Clarify what? Mr. Mercer did not obstruct us. He told us we could not enter beyond the fence without permission. We stayed outside and left. His partner nodded. That is what happened. The room got quieter. Vanessa moved to the next slide. Regardless, the larger issue is the recorded agreement. There it was. She displayed the county recording number and explained that the original developer had secured permanent rights necessary for Silver Ridge to operate. Those rights transferred to the association, she said, and they have been exercised continuously ever since. Gregory spoke again. That part is generally correct, subject to the terms of the instrument. Exactly, Vanessa said quickly, which is why one new property owner cannot simply challenge 19 years of established control. Rachel leaned close to me. Let her finish. Vanessa did. She talked about road maintenance, drainage, service access, community expectations, and the money Silver Ridge had spent over the years. Some of it was reasonable. If I had walked into that room knowing nothing about the paperwork, I might have wondered why the new guy on the mountain was causing trouble over a road everyone had used for years. Then Thomas Reed, one of the board members, asked, Vanessa, does the association own the corridor or not? She answered without looking at Gregory. Silver Ridge controls it under the recorded agreement. That was not my question. Gregory slowly put his pen down. Vanessa sighed. The practical distinction does not change our authority. Gregory turned toward her. It may change quite a bit. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely irritated with him. You reviewed the agreement. I reviewed the 4 pages provided in the board file. Rachel opened our folder. Gregory noticed. Mr. Shaw, she said, may I ask how many pages your copy shows as recorded? Gregory checked the first page. 6. And how many pages are in front of you? He did not answer immediately. He counted them anyway. 4. Several residents started talking at once. Vanessa raised a hand. The final pages are administrative material. They do not change the association's rights. Rachel looked at her. Have you read them? Vanessa hesitated. It was brief, but everyone saw it. I have reviewed the relevant association records. Gregory turned toward Martin. Do we have the complete instrument here? Martin searched through 2 folders and shook his head. Not that I can find. Rachel stood, walked to the table, and placed a certified 6-page copy in front of Gregory. This came from the county recorder. Gregory checked the stamp, then compared the recording number with his copy. Same number. Same date. He turned to page 5. Nobody told him where to look. He read the first paragraph, moved down the page, then went back to the top and read it again. Vanessa shifted beside him. Gregory. He held up one finger, still reading. Then he turned to page 6. His eyes stopped at the signature block. Where did you get this? He asked Rachel. The same public record your packet cites. Thomas leaned forward. What does it say? Gregory looked at Vanessa, then at the board. The original developer was not conveyed ownership of the corridor. Vanessa frowned. We know there was an agreement. It is a lease. Nobody spoke for a moment. A woman near the front finally asked, You mean Silver Ridge rents the road? Gregory chose his answer carefully. The association succeeded to the developer's lessee interest under a later assignment. I need to review that assignment before I say more. Vanessa recovered quickly. Fine. Lease, agreement, access arrangement. Whatever terminology you prefer, the association inherited the developer's rights. Rachel nodded from beside the table. Yes, it did. Vanessa looked almost triumphant. Then I do not see the issue. Rachel did not answer. She took one more certified document from the folder and placed it beside the lease. Gregory picked it up. This is the assignment. Yes. He read the first page. Then the second. Silver Ridge assumed the lessee obligations as well. Correct. Vanessa shook her head. Obligations do not change our right to use the corridor. No, Rachel said. Daniel has never said you cannot use it. Thomas looked toward me. You are not trying to close the road? No. Then why have we spent a week talking about enforcement? I looked at Vanessa. You would have to ask the person who called me an unauthorized occupant. That brought a few uncomfortable laughs from the room. Vanessa ignored them. This still does not establish his authority over association operations. Gregory was already reading further into the assignment. Rachel, who currently holds the lessor interest? That is the next document. She placed Robert's recorded transfer on the table, followed by the estate records connecting the parcel to me. Gregory stopped talking altogether. He read slowly, checking names and recording numbers against the lease. Vanessa stood beside him with both hands on the table. Gregory, what is it? He looked at me first. Daniel, the 42-acre parcel transferred to you through Robert Mercer's estate. Yes. And these are certified copies of the recorded transfer connecting the lessor interest to that parcel. Rachel answered. They are. Gregory leaned back in his chair. Thomas asked, can somebody please explain this in normal English? Gregory took off his glasses. Silver Ridge has the right to use the corridor under the lease. But based on the documents I am looking at, the land underneath it remained with the Mercer property. Thomas pointed toward me. And he owns the Mercer property. Yes. Vanessa's face tightened. So what? Gregory looked at her. So the man you have been demanding surrender control to is the successor to the lessor on the agreement you are using against him. Vanessa stared at the documents, then at me. You knew this? I shook my head. Not when you came to my porch. But you found out. I hired Rachel to find out. And you said nothing. Before I could answer, Gregory turned another page. Vanessa, did you authorize a proposed widening near his gate? The room went quiet again. She looked at him. Maintenance was evaluating it. You put it in writing, I said. Gregory found the alterations clause on page 5. He read for several seconds, then looked toward Rachel. Lessor approval? For widening, relocation, and permanent modifications beyond ordinary maintenance. Gregory closed his eyes briefly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Please tell me we did not threaten legal action against our own lessor while asking to change leased land without his approval. Nobody answered him. They did not need to. Vanessa's signed notices were sitting in my folder, and every person in that room had received her emails. Gregory asked for 10 minutes. Vanessa objected before he finished the sentence. We have 80 people sitting here waiting for an answer, which is exactly why I am not giving them one until I have read these documents. He gathered the lease, assignment, transfer records, and my deed into one stack. Martin, I need the board file. The complete file, not the meeting packet. Martin stood. It is in the office. Bring it. Vanessa leaned toward Gregory and lowered her voice, but the microphone in front of her was still on. We cannot let him walk in here and overturn 19 years of association authority with paperwork nobody has seen before. A man near the front said, It is county paperwork, Vanessa. Someone else added, Apparently our attorney had not seen it either. Vanessa reached over and switched off her microphone. Rachel touched my arm. Stay out of it. Gladly. I had spent enough years in construction meetings to recognize the moment when a room stopped caring who sounded confident and started wanting dates, signatures, and documents. Martin returned carrying a thick binder. Gregory opened it and asked, Where are the property agreements? Martin pointed to a tab. Gregory flipped through several pages, stopped, and pulled out an old accounting summary. What is this line item? Martin bent over the page. Land access expense. Paid to whom? I do not know. Accounting handles it. Thomas Reed stood and came around the table. How much? Gregory read the figure, then checked another year. Same description. Different amount. Vanessa shook her head. That could be maintenance. Martin looked uncomfortable. Maintenance is listed separately. Thomas stared at him. So we have been paying for access? It looks that way. A woman in the third row raised her hand. Paying who? Nobody answered immediately. Rachel quietly opened her folder and took out the payment records she had almost left at the cabin. Gregory, these may help. He accepted them, compared the account numbers, and nodded. These appear to be lease payments. Vanessa sat down for the first time all evening. I was never told about that. Martin looked at her. The management company handles recurring obligations. The board approves the annual budget as a package. Then why does nobody call it rent? The older records do. That produced another wave of conversation around the room. Gregory turned his microphone back on. Everyone, please. I think we can answer the immediate question tonight, even if the association needs more time for a complete legal review. The room settled. Silver Ridge has valid access rights under a long-term ground and access lease. Nothing presented tonight suggests Mr. Mercer intends to interfere with those existing rights. Thomas looked toward me. Correct. Correct. Use the road the way the agreement allows. I have never had a problem with that. Gregory continued. The documents also indicate that the underlying property was retained by the Mercer side of the agreement and that Mr. Mercer is the current successor to that interest. For that reason, I recommend the board immediately suspend any notice claiming association ownership of his land. Vanessa leaned toward him. What about control? Within the lease, the association has defined use rights. Outside the lease, we do not get to invent them. That was the first sentence all evening that made Vanessa stop trying to interrupt. Gregory picked up her notice about widening the entrance. I also recommend that all proposed changes to the corridor stop until we determine whether lessor approval is required. It was only a survey, Vanessa said. Then stopping costs us nothing. Thomas made the motion. Another board member seconded it. The vote to suspend the enforcement notices passed 4-1. Vanessa was the only no. The vote to halt gate modifications, widening, and new permanent signage also passed 4-1. Then Thomas asked about the orange markers. There should not be any, I said. The contractors never entered after I told them I did not consent. One of the maintenance workers raised his hand from the side wall. That is correct. We stayed outside the fence. Vanessa turned toward him. There were markers placed the first afternoon. He shook his head. Not by our crew. You asked us to, but we did not. Martin quietly said. I believe 2 temporary markers were already near the road from an earlier planning visit. We can verify and remove anything outside the defined corridor. Gregory nodded. Do that tomorrow. It was a small detail, but I was glad it was finally clear. Nobody had spent the week wandering across my land while I stood there collecting photographs. I had told them no. They had listened. Vanessa had simply kept writing notices as though saying something often enough could make it happen. Thomas picked up the first email she had sent to the community. I have another question. Why did we call Daniel an unauthorized occupant? Vanessa looked at him. At the time, he was refusing to cooperate. That does not make him unauthorized. We did not have the full title information. A resident near the aisle said. Then why did you email all of us before you had it? Vanessa looked toward the audience. I was protecting association interests. Another voice came from the back. From the guy who owns the land we lease? A few people laughed, not loudly, but enough. Vanessa's face reddened. I did not enjoy that as much as I thought I might. Mostly I felt tired. Rachel must have noticed because she leaned over. Almost done. Thomas turned to me. Daniel, what do you want from the association? That was the first question anyone from Silver Ridge had asked me all week that mattered. I stood. I want you to keep using the access you actually have. Maintain it. Plow it. Do what the lease allows. I am not trying to make life harder for anyone down here. I looked at Vanessa, then back at the board. But my cabin is not association property. My acreage is not community land because somebody started calling it that in an email. If you want to change something on the leased corridor, ask me the way the agreement says you are supposed to. That is it. Thomas nodded. That seems reasonable. Gregory gathered the documents again. I will complete a written review before the board takes further action. Vanessa stood. So we are just accepting his interpretation? Gregory looked at her. No. We are accepting recorded documents until somebody produces better recorded documents. She had no answer for that. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later. People gathered around the board table, asking questions about budgets, old payments, and why the complete lease had never made it into Gregory's packet. Rachel and I headed for the door. We were almost outside when Vanessa called my name. I turned. She walked toward us without the folder she had carried all week. You could have told me, she said. When? As soon as you knew. Rachel confirmed it this morning. You still let me stand up there and present everything. I looked back at the crowded room. Vanessa, you scheduled the meeting. You sent the emails. You brought the map. You cited the lease. She crossed her arms. You knew I did not have the last 2 pages. I knew your attorney did not have them when I walked in tonight. Before that, I assumed somebody at Silver Ridge had read the document you were using to threaten me. She looked at Rachel. And you thought this was appropriate? Rachel answered evenly. I thought your association should read its own recorded lease before demanding that my client surrender rights he never agreed to surrender. Vanessa looked back at me. This is not over. Gregory had followed her from the room and heard that. For tonight, Vanessa, it is. She turned toward him. He held up her signed enforcement notice. Tomorrow morning, This gets withdrawn. Then we review the lease from page 1. All 6 pages this time. The first thing I noticed Monday morning was the absence of paper. For a week, every conversation with Silver Ridge had produced another notice, another email, another document telling me what I could not do on my own property. That morning, there was nothing on the gate. No maintenance truck waiting on the road. No new deadline. Just frost on the meadow and a red squirrel arguing with something in the woodpile. At 9:12, Gregory emailed Rachel and me a formal withdrawal of the enforcement notices. Silver Ridge acknowledged that its rights came from the long-term ground and access lease, not ownership of the underlying land. The proposed widening was canceled. Any permanent changes to the corridor would require review under the lease, including lessor approval where the agreement required it. I read the letter once, then called Rachel. So that is it. For the immediate dispute, mostly. Mostly is a lawyer word. It is one of our favorites. I could hear her typing. Gregory still needs to clean up the association records and confirm the payment account. But they withdrew the demands. You keep your gate. They keep their existing access. Which is what Robert arranged 19 years ago. Exactly. I looked at the crooked cabinet above the sink. He could have saved us a lot of trouble by leaving a better note. They maintain, we retain was pretty good. You saw that. You sent me a photograph on Wednesday. It has been a long week. Rachel laughed. Go unpack your house, Daniel. I finally did. Over the next few days, the cabin started looking less like a storage unit. I found Robert's old cast iron skillet behind a stack of pans, put my books in the downstairs room, and repaired the porch railing I had been meaning to fix since the day Vanessa arrived. Silver Ridge maintenance continued using the corridor. Nobody asked me for permission to perform ordinary work the lease already allowed, and I did not expect them to. A plow truck came through after an early dusting of snow. The driver waved. I waved back. That was how I had expected living near neighbors to work. The following Thursday, Gregory invited me and Rachel to a board meeting. I almost declined. Rachel told me to go. Why? Because they are correcting the record, and your name is in the record. You know how to make an evening sound exciting. I will buy the coffee. The meeting was smaller this time. Maybe 30 residents instead of 80. Vanessa sat at the end of the board table, quiet, with no presentation behind her. Gregory summarized his title review in plain language. Silver Ridge was the successor lessee. I was the successor lessor. The association had defined rights within the corridor, while ownership of the underlying property remained with my parcel. Then Martin opened the accounting records. We found lease payments going back 14 years in the current system, he said. Older records are archived, but the description is consistent. Thomas Reed looked at Vanessa. So the association was paying under a lease while we were sending Daniel notices saying we controlled the land as if it belonged to us. Vanessa shook her head. I did not review accounting before the enforcement action. Thomas stared at her. That is not helping. A few people laughed. Vanessa looked down. At her papers. Gregory continued before the room could turn into a pile-on. The issue is not whether anyone acted with bad intent. The issue is that the association made claims beyond what its documents support. We are correcting those claims. I respected him for saying it that way. He was not there to embarrass Vanessa. He was there to keep Silver Ridge from repeating the mistake. The board adopted a new rule requiring legal review before future property enforcement involving recorded easements, leases, or disputed boundaries. Vanessa was also removed from unilateral authority to issue property notices without board approval. She voted against that one. It passed anyway. After the meeting, Thomas found me near the door. Daniel, I owe you an apology. You did not come to my cabin. I sat on a board that let it happen. He held out his hand. I shook it. Then read all 6 pages next time. He laughed. Trust me, that lesson is sticking. Outside, Rachel handed me a coffee. Satisfied? She asked. I will be satisfied when I get through one full day without hearing the phrase association authority. Tomorrow has potential. About 3 weeks later, I was replacing a loose board on the porch when a dark sport utility vehicle stopped near my gate. Vanessa was driving. She lowered the window but did not get out. Daniel. Vanessa. For a moment, neither of us said anything. She looked up toward the cabin. I still think you handled that meeting deliberately. I attended the meeting you invited me to. You knew what those documents said. By then, yes. You could have called me first. I set the hammer on the railing. Would you have listened? She opened her mouth, then stopped. I waited. Finally, she said, "I would have called Gregory. That would have been a good start." She looked toward the road. "I spent 6 years on that board. Everyone told me Silver Ridge controlled that corridor. It does have rights there. You know what I mean." "I do." Her voice softened a little. "I thought you were some new owner coming in from the city who was going to lock the gate and make everyone fight for access." "You could have asked." She nodded once. "Probably." I had not expected that answer. She started to raise the window, then stopped. "There is something I still do not understand. Why did you keep asking me to put everything in writing?" I smiled. "Because every time I asked a question, you gave me another answer I could verify." "And when did you realize you held the lease?" Rachel confirmed the chain Friday morning. Vanessa looked surprised. "That late? I told you from the beginning I was still reading." She gave a short laugh, mostly at herself. "I really should have read those last 2 pages." "Yes." She started the vehicle forward, then stopped one final time. "For what it is worth, I am sorry about calling you an unauthorized occupant." "I appreciate that." She nodded and drove down the mountain. I went back to the porch. Winter was beginning to settle over the ridge, and I still had plenty of work ahead of me. The roof needed attention before the heavy snow. The storage shed leaned more than I liked. Robert's kitchen faucet still whistled whenever I turned it halfway. I could fix most of that. The crooked cabinet door was staying exactly where it was. Silver Ridge kept using the road. I kept owning the ground beneath it. They maintained what the lease told them to maintain, and when they wanted to discuss a change, Martin sent me an email instead of an enforcement notice. Nobody lost access. Nobody lost a home. Nobody needed some dramatic courtroom showdown. The whole dispute had started because Vanessa arrived at my cabin certain that 19 years of use had answered every question worth asking. Robert had known better. He had let his neighbors use part of his land without pretending that permission erased ownership. In the end, I did not have to take anything away from Silver Ridge. I only had to make sure everyone read the same 6 pages. A month after I moved in, I sat on the porch before sunrise with a cup of coffee and watched the lights below the ridge come on one house at a time. A Silver Ridge maintenance truck passed along the corridor, and the driver lifted a hand through the windshield. I waved back. Then he continued down the road. I went back inside my cabin, and for the first time since moving day, everybody seemed to know exactly whose land they were driving across.